We just appreciate everyone for showing up today. We want to honor you for taking some time out of your busy days to be with us as LadyTitans. It's so fun to see you. Thank you for those of you that are at a place where you can show your face. We love to see your faces. That way I can recognize you when I see you at Pantheon. We can be like, high five, LadyTitan in the house. It'll be so fun. So thank you for sharing your faces if you have that option to do that. We have such a treat for you all today. We have a guest speaker. She is our head of pro products growth and retention here at ServiceTitan. She's located out of Chicago. This is Stephanie Payen. She's amazing at all things. She's just an innovative leader, and she did some training for us at ServiceTitan for a lot of the women here at ServiceTitan, and kind of taught us how to create our own career path. And sometimes we see our career path as just like this straight line of where we want to go, but she teaches that career paths aren't at all straight. Sometimes they are very squiggly lines, and we have to figure that out as we go. And so she's got some really, really awesome stuff to share with us today. And so, Stephanie, we're so grateful that you could be with us. Thanks for taking some time out of your busy day. And Stephanie's actually on maternity leave right now. She's got a cute little 3.5-month-old baby at home with her 2 other kids. So, okay, everyone take a look
at that
baby. Oh my gosh. So we know that mommy time is so valuable, so that makes this time even more precious that you're sharing with us today. So Steph, I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you want to share your screen?
Sure thing.
Awesome.
So where we're going to start is actually a video which talks a little bit about what a squiggly career path is, but basically not surprising as women, right? We were sort of raised knowing that our parents had these really linear career paths. They stayed one place for 20 or 30 or 40 years. And that's not really the way that works today. And that's also not practical for many of us, particularly as we think about how we sort of interweave life and work and kids at home and spouses and changes and moving and all of that. And so one of the things I like to talk about is that it doesn't need to be a straight line, right? Squiggly is actually really good. So let's make sure the video works on this. Hang on. I think it's gonna work better if I stick it on my other monitor. So we're gonna watch a couple minutes of this.
When we met at university 20 years ago, we made for unlikely friends. I'm an extrovert who gets involved in everything and talks to anyone.
And I'm an introverted ideas person who finds extroverts energizing, but a bit intimidating.
Despite our differences, we both had an ambition to climb the ladder and have a successful career.
We were motivated by how far and how fast we could progress. And we thought that our route to the top would look something a bit like this. And in those first few years of work, we were all about promotions and pay rises. We were preoccupied by the positions that we held and how senior our job titles sounded. And on the surface, everything seemed to be on track. But we started to get this sense that the ladder might actually be holding us back. The obvious next step wasn't always the most appealing. And we were both excited about exploring opportunities that weren't necessarily based on what we'd done before. It wasn't what we'd anticipated, but our careers had started to look and feel much more like this. Squiggly.
A squiggly career is both full of uncertainty and full of possibility. Change is happening all of the time. Some of it is in our control and some of it's not. Success isn't one size fits all. Our squiggles are as individual as we are. And for me, that's meant a career where I've moved from working on foldable credit cards in one company, they didn't catch on, to building and launching a loyalty app for another. And that one is still going.
And I've moved from making magazines to working on food waste, from a 5 to a 4-day week, so I could spend more time on personal projects and volunteering. I've already had more jobs and worked in more organisations than my dad. And he's been working for twice as long as I have. And I'm the rule, not the exception.
When we started to share the idea of squiggly careers with people, we were surprised by how much it stuck. It seemed to give people something that perhaps they didn't even know that they needed, a way of describing both their experiences and their aspirations. Someone even told us that they took our book, which has a big squiggle on the front of it, into a job interview as a way of describing their career so far. But we
So just where I like to start, because I think when you think about what careers look like, they're really not linear anymore. And so a chunk of what we're going to be doing today is talking and just having a conversation together around how we really look at designing our careers and taking charge, and not just thinking about, okay, I have to follow this one path, but how do you start to define and explore your options? And I think part of what makes careers so interesting is that, once upon a time, people were really specialized with the skill set, right? If you were an assembly line worker, you had deep technical expertise in a certain machine, and many skills today are much more transferable. And so how do we really dig into what our skills are and what motivates us in ways that we can then articulate that and turn it into what the next chapter in our career looks like? And I can share this with folks afterwards. But essentially, what we're talking about is designing your own squiggly career path. And so one thing that I like to chat through is, what does it mean to actually apply the principles of design thinking, which is this methodology that mostly came out of Stanford, which I admit I'm biased, I did go to school there, around thinking like a designer and not just applying design to problems like designing a product or designing a piece of technology. ServiceTitan obviously has lots of product designers, but how do we apply this way of thinking to any problem we might face, which it's a pretty repeatable process, right? So step one is empathize, listen to yourself, talk to people around you, right? If I were to ask my husband or my manager or whomever else, when do you see me getting excited when I'm talking about work? When do you see me really sort of run down and saying, oh man, I can't wait for today to be over. I need to go for a run or to hug my kids or whatever it is. How do we sort of leverage our empathy and really listen to what we're hearing? Step two is defining the problem, right? And so the problem might be, hey, I actually spend most of my day doing activities that don't energize me. Or the problem might be, I'm not really challenged and I'm not really growing. Or the problem might be, actually, I'm challenged too much and I don't have enough support. So how do we really define our problem statements? How do we ideate? So come up with some solutions. Prototype, which is really trying things out in a lightweight way. It doesn't mean that you have to completely overhaul everything you're doing tomorrow. It means, how do we start to put into practice some experiments to see what might work better? Which is that testing phase, right? And then you sort of go back and you do it again. What worked? What didn't work? How do we think about it? And so the founders of the design thinking school at Stanford, wrote a book called Design Your Life. And there are some resources at the end of this, but it's basically, how do you apply the principles of design thinking to your life, to your career, to your home? I was poking around the website yesterday. There's actually a virtual workshop in the fall that's specific to women, which could be interesting. I didn't get that deep, but it's there. But basically, how do you use this principle of really applying design thinking and being intentional about your career and your life? There's a video that I linked in the presentation. It's long, we're not going to watch the whole thing, but it gives you a little bit more granularity on using those design thinking principles. Talked about this a little bit, right? Your career is not a straight line. And just because you're on one path doesn't mean that your path can't shift. Right. And sort of you follow this path up to a point, and you've made a number of decisions along the way, but you have an infinite number of decisions still open to you. And so even if you're stuck, don't feel like you always have to stay stuck, or that just because you started down a marketing path, marketing is all you can do, or HR is all you can do. How do you really sort of extrapolate what you've learned and your experiences and your skills and be able to apply them to what you want to do next? So again, right, typical career path, up is the only way to grow. Really what we're talking about is, you can go sideways, you can go to a different company, you can go to a different function. Do you want to be somewhere big? Do you want to be somewhere small? Do you want to be managing people or not so much, right? People management is sort of hailed as this, like, here's what leadership is. But there are actually lots of ways to be a leader and to become a leader without necessarily directly managing people. And lots of people don't love people management. It is a hard thing to do, right? It requires a lot of emotional investment. And sometimes either you might not like it, You might not be in a moment in your life where it makes sense for you to be able to do that, right? Maybe you've got something going on at home, or you're working on a master's program or whatever. There are lots of ways to be a leader and to continue to grow without necessarily going on a management track. So what we're going to do is, this is our first exercise. We're going to take 5 or 10 minutes. Angie, you tell me about how much time we've got. Let's call it 5 minutes, right? But take a few minutes, identify 3 moments at work that you felt really in the zone, right? So you're on fire, you're stimulated, you're completely engaged. What are you doing? What kind of problems are you solving? And then identify 3 moments where you felt the opposite, right? You're de-energized, you're disengaged. What were those moments, and how did they make you feel? So take a couple minutes to think, and then we're going to open it up, and would love to hear from each of you in terms of what gets you energized, and what sort of turns you off. Do that. I can only see a few of you, but give me a thumbs up or drop it in the chat if you're good to go. Cool. All right. Who wants to kick us off? What gets you energized?
I'm happy to start. Can you hear me?
Yep. And now I can see that the hand is raised. So jump on in.
Okay. So this is my first time with LadyTitans, so thanks for having me. So I would say for me, when I'm in the zone, thank you, is when I'm creating things and solving problems for the company. That really lights my fire. It could be like creating tools. So I was hired to work for an HVAC company as an office manager, and really trying to kind of standardize the company, create policies, create an office manual, create just things like that. I love doing. I could do it all day long. And so for me, when I'm doing that kind of stuff, I really, really like it. For For me, I feel really de-energized when I am meeting resistance at work, or folks that bottleneck kind of what I'm doing, like I'm trying to get stuff done. And then there's people that are just like bottlenecks, and also just working with negative people. And I find that, how am I feeling? It just really is de-energizing is a great way to say it. I don't feel disengaged necessarily, but just frustrated. I tend to take it home with me. And like, those are nights that I'm like, I think I'm gonna go to bed early tonight. Like I just feel low. Right? Great way to say it. That's it for me.
Yeah. And I think, you know, there's always a certain amount of roadblocks that we're going to run into. Somebody I was chatting with the other day referred to it as the dirty 30, that in any job, 30% of what you're doing is going to be no fun. And you kind of just got to get it done. But how do we keep it to 30 a lot of the time? All right, Krista, I think I see your hand up.
So my three that get me energized are like marketing, content, planning, and creation. So whether that's internal for the office use or external for social media, pamphlets, whatever. And then organizational process and procedure improvements, and then learning and implementing new ServiceTitan features. We've only been with ServiceTitan 6 months now, so everything is new. So anything current ServiceTitan or even the new features coming out, you know, seeing how those can or can't work with our company and making them the best possible outcome. And then the three that get me disengaged are ServiceTitan issues. That's a whole nother story, but that's what's got me flustered today. Mundane and simple tasks. You know, a lot of times I think that a few of our people in the office don't utilize Google enough to try and solve the simple things themselves. And then bad attitudes again. So glad I'm not the only one there.
Feel it. And then Kristen, I see a hand up too.
Hi, my name's Kristen. I'm a service manager for a company. We've got about 40 techs. Our service department is 11 to 15 techs, and we're fairly new in this department. A lot of the things that really get me revved up are defining ServiceTitan, getting new processes set, making everything more efficient for my techs and dispatch, anything that has to do with designing anything to make their lives easier. What really gets me down is when I have to get into the day-to-day of business, when I'm dispatching, when I'm working with customers. My role is not to be in front of the customers anymore. My role is to be more on the management side and developing this business. And I find that's when I get hugely burnt out. And you take on too much, and I don't have time for my team or the people who need me when I'm dealing with the little day-to-day, everything that happens. That's when I find I struggle.
What have you found to be effective to keep yourself out of that day-to-day instead of getting sucked into it?
I close my office door. And I have a hard time doing that. I have a very hard time saying, no, I'm not available. I have to get this done. But the last probably 3 weeks, I've really developed more of my own time and blocking it off and just saying no. And it's been a huge game changer.
Yeah, it's tough sometimes.
Yeah.
But boundaries are always hard. I feel like also as women, it's even harder.
Absolutely right. I want to take care of everybody there.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Anybody else want to share theirs before we keep going? Keep on keeping on. All right. So this is another exercise that I like to do. And I encourage people just to do it sort of with some regularity, whether it's quarterly, semi-annually, whatever. But if you were to read this list, how many points would you give yourself if you give 1 point for every statement that you mostly agree with? And you can just drop it in the chat. Angie gets a 9. That's pretty good. I would say you're in the right job. My gosh, we got a lot of 9s. I think the last time I did this, it was mostly like 6, 7. Y'all are pretty happy. That's impressive. So anyway, I like having people do this exercise because it's sort of a gut check on how are things going? Are we in good shape? Do we need to think about making some real changes? I can't believe how many 8s and 9s there are. Y'all are rocking it. Are we in good shape? Do we need to make some real changes? What would make life better, right? And so if you think about, okay, how do I get to an 8? How do I get to an 8, right? Is it am I not learning new things? Am I not moving forward? What do I need to do to get back to an 8? And how do I sort of apply some of that listening to myself and defining the problem and ideating and testing to get there? So what we talk about too is how do you take ownership of your career development? And it's really easy to say, well, I can't do that because somebody said no, or I can't do that because, or whatever, you know, putting the ball in somebody else's court. But at the end of the day, I'm happy to share the deck. At the end of the day, right, we all own our own careers. And so if we think less around, as we think less around, okay, well, my manager is responsible for my development. They should be surfacing opportunities for promotion and new problems for me to solve. How do we flip that on its head? And particularly in a work environment where people typically only stay in a role for a couple of years, even if you stay at the same company, you're unlikely to stay in the same role for a long time. It's hard to say, okay, I'm gonna sort of ride my manager's coattails to wherever they're going, and when they get promoted, I'll get promoted, and whatever. And really start thinking about, in this unpredictable world, how do you take ownership of your career? What does that look like? What does that mean, right? And so one of the tools that we like to use to do this is called a career action plan template, which I'm also happy to share. We'll get there. But you don't need that perfect map of the future. You don't need to say, okay, I knew at age 8 that I wanted to be a doctor, and everything that I have done since then, you know, I studied chemistry in high school and I did all my pre-med requirements in college, and then I went to med school and whatever. Most of us don't really have that kind of direction, right? And so if you think, hey, I really like solving problems where I get to make processes more efficient, how do I spend more of my time on process improvement and less of my time answering customer calls? General direction. How do we move the needle to spending more time doing A than B? So think about, how do you take ownership of your career? And so this is one of the other things that I was talking about, is consider using a career action plan. And so today what we've done is a little bit of reflection, right, on what's working, what's not working, how do we sort of define what we'd like to do next. It doesn't have to be, here's where I want to be in 10 years. It doesn't even have to be, here's where I want to be in 5 years. What do we want to do next, and how do we take control of it? And so using something like a career action plan template is a tool that can help you articulate these goals, sort of facilitate the reflection, and then keep you honest, right? It's basically a project plan that says, I've identified these things that I want to work on that are going to help me get to that next step, whatever that next step may be, right? And the next step might not be a promotion. The next step might be, I want to get this certification. I want to go through Danielle's program and be a certified admin. I want to figure out how to be more efficient at work so that I can make preschool pickup every single day, right? Whatever it may be, but how do you really leverage a tool to stay on top of things? And so what we'll do, and I've got a couple of extra, I'm going to pull out the ServiceTitan internal mobility resources because that's not relevant, but got a couple extra things in here. And so this is an example of a career action plan. Sorry, guys, you can tell I have not been on my computer very much lately. Can you read it, or do you want me to blow it up a little bit more?
Maybe make it a little bit bigger if you can.
Yep. All right.
Perfect.
So the way that this is set up, and it is a bit more geared towards technology company employees because that's who I manage, but I think it's relevant anyway. So the way this is set up, right, is we've got a couple different kinds of goals. We have career goals, we have life goals. Skills are where we want to develop competency, not very surprising. Learning and development, how do we build those skills? And then your network is, who can we lean on to help us get to where we're going? And so the exploration worksheet is a deeper version of what we did today. It's, what are those moments you feel in the zone? When are you feeling de-energized or disengaged? How do you come up with a bit of a purpose statement around your career goals, right? And so for me, what I really like is working with smart people on tough, messy problems that impact small businesses. That's it. It's not saying I want to be a CEO. It's not saying I really like doing customer service. It's sort of an abstract, smart people, messy problems, real impact on real businesses. The next step of this is identifying your patterns. So as you think about what energizes you, what demotivates you, what your purpose is, what are the common threads, right? And when you think about the jobs and the projects you've picked, what are the common threads that have really followed you throughout your career thus far? If you're more junior in your career, that might be following you throughout school as well. If you've been doing this, as some people have said, for 20 plus years, you've probably got a lot to draw on, and there are probably some real common threads. And then there's a list of thought starters, right? And so this is a bit more reflection. If you're still feeling stuck, how do you start to draw some of these pieces out? How do you articulate your perfect role? And it's specifically perfect role as opposed to perfect job, because jobs are so fluid. It's, your role is, what are you doing, right? Not just what is your title. How do you describe success? What makes you successful today? What makes you good at your job, right? There's a reason that you're in the job that you're in. Do you feel like you're advancing? Do you want to be an individual contributor or a manager, right? And so sort of starting to tease apart some of these things that could help you pick your next direction. And then there is a sample career action plan. And so this is, it's set up sort of as that guidance sheet discuss. Sorry, guys, ladies, running into word vomit because I haven't talked this much in a long time because I've been on mat leave. So I've mostly been doing toddler make believe. All right. So what's your goal? Career goals and life goals. Life goals are as important as career goals. And let's be real, right? Like, it is not just about what we do to get a paycheck, and career is a huge part of how we spend our times, but it's not the only part. So be mindful that there are life goals as well. When do you want to get these things done? Little bit more detail. So what is this actually about, right? Buy a house, continue to save for a house. How are we going to get there? What are the actions required to get there? Why is this important to me, right? You might want financial security for your family. You might want to do more strategic, impactful work. This is sort of the project management piece of it. What's that status? When do you want to get it done? And when did you actually get it done? And this helps you sort of hold yourself accountable as well. And so we've got goals, skills, learning and development. So it might be that you want to go to Pantheon or, really take a special course or whatever this year. And then network is, who are the people that you know that are going to help you get there, right? And so if you really want to become a digital marketing manager, who do you know that's doing that job today that can tell you more about what that job is and what it takes to be successful in their role, right? Or who do you know that is hiring for that job that could, even if you're not ready today, that could say, hey, here are the types of things that I'm hiring for. These are the skills that I would recommend you develop, and here are a couple of ways to do that. And so being able to have these conversations, and it goes back to that listening and empathy piece at the beginning. If you say, I've decided that the next thing I really want to be is a digital marketing manager, what do you need to be able to build the plan to get there? What skills do you need? What experience do you need on your resume that somebody would say, yes, that's the woman I want to hire for this job? And how do you leverage the people around you and the resources around you to really get there? So that's kind of the headline. And that's what we talk about squiggly career paths. They're not a straight line. There's lots of options, but how do you build the tools and the resources to help you figure out what the right path is for you, knowing that life isn't a straight line? questions, thoughts, feedback, ways I can be more helpful?
I love that. I love that template. I love how you had it broken down into different sections of the goals that you want to accomplish, the skills that you need, not only to accomplish those goals, but whatever skills for that next step, the learning and development, and then the networking part. Like it's so cool to think about those. All of those are really important factors that play into helping you reach your goals. So, when I think about that, I'm like, yeah, that helps with career goals, but just any goals in general for life. That's a really cool
Yeah, I
to look
think
at.
you've got to be a whole person, and any big, hairy, audacious goal is tough when you think about it. And it's sort of hard to, it's easy to say, okay, here's this big thing, I have no idea how to get there. But you don't have to know how to get there, you just have to know how to take the first step.
Exactly.
How do you really break it down to that first step? Lauren, I see a hand raised.
Yeah, I think what you just said about it's about the next right step, not necessarily what's at the top of the landing or the end of the staircase. And I really like that this structure is specifically non-specific and it kind of forces you to think about what's underneath everything that might be a little bit more like administrative and sterile sounding. Instead of saying like, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's more about what makes you happy and what makes you feel engaged. And you don't have to necessarily put a label on it. I'm sure there's a lot of people in here that found themselves in this industry without really expecting that this is ever where you'd end up. And there were a whole lot of 8s and 9s in there. So it's interesting that if you just follow the things that you like to do instead of the title you think you should have, you might end up where you need to be.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny. I actually, so I got an MBA, I got a big fancy MBA, and I went into business school saying, my thesis is I want to start an incubator for people who are in small food businesses, whether it's restaurants or snack foods or whatever. And so coming out of business school, I thought I had designed my absolutely perfect job. Is basically being an operating partner in a small food incubator with other partners. One came from finance, one was a distributor, one came from big CPG, but sort of Mondelez, Oreo, whatever. And it failed in 9 months. And I sort of looked around and I said, do I still want to be in food? And what I decided is that the problems weren't messy enough. So yes, I was working with small businesses. But if you're in food, the only sort of levers you have are, what are my manufacturing costs? How do I get more product onto shelves, and how do I price it? What do I spend on marketing? That's kind of it. And you look at something like home services, where the problems are infinitely complex in ways that are completely surprising. And I grew up in an adjacent business. My family made ladders. But it never occurred to me just how complicated home service businesses could be and how tricky the problems are to solve, and how interesting because they're so messy, right? How do you even think about doing inventory or what you stock on a truck if you do appliances, or infinitely complex in ways that are really, really fascinating. So. Yeah.
Let's see. I love these comments. Krista, did you have a question or comment?
I was just going to say, I love that. I'm a big problem solver too. And I initially got started in this career field by accident. I just needed a job to get me by to help fund going to culinary school. And so I was just like, okay, I'll work here 2-3 years, save up some money, be able to go and not have to take out too much in loans. I moved to New York and, go to culinary school. And here I am 12 years later. And every day I solve a problem. Every day I learn something new. And I just love it.
Yeah. I love this industry for what it's worth. I've been here 6.5 years and I may never leave. So. Krista, there's a question for you. Did you go to CIA, which I'm assuming is Culinary Institute and not CIA like the government?
I Yeah, I did not go to the CIA. I decided that taking out $100,000 in student loans was not going to be the best vision for my future. I do bake myself and I'm self-taught. And that's as far as it will likely get unless, you know, something in my career path changes. So
So fun. I'm loving all these comments in the chat too. Fun to see how a lot of us have pivoted and kind of found ourselves in a path that's more engaging, more fulfilling, more challenging, whatever that is for you. So amazing. Stephanie, thank you so much for what you've shared. Are there any other questions, comments, anything for Stephanie before we close up our call today? We still have a little bit of time if there are more questions.
And also other ways that I can be helpful as you try and navigate what your next step looks like too.
Are we going to have access to the PowerPoint presentation and the links?
I'm happy to provide it. Angie, you would know how to.
That would be great. Yeah, we were hoping we could share that out with everyone. So yeah, that's awesome.
We have our first baby guest on camera too. It's always my favorite.
There we go. Yes.
yes, she is here most days. So
Just to clarify, will the deck have the template?
It does have the link in it. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's awesome. We do have another question from Kristen. Thanks for raising your hand, Kristen.
Hi, just wanted to say that was great. Thank you for the presentation. I've been in HVAC for probably close to 30 years. So I've pivoted many, many times in my career within the same scope. And my life looks a lot like that squiggly line. And it's okay. And change is good. And that's what keeps you sort of on your toes too at the end of the day. So I think it's a good reminder, especially for women, that we aren't going to hit our target sort of in a straight line right away. It is going to take some work, but it's well worth it. So thank you for the reminder.
And I'm just getting the links for you. Oh, sorry, I need to update the presentation link. Hold on. All right, if you guys try again, you should be able to access it now.
The link is open since it's Google Docs.
Yeah, it's Google Doc. I just changed it to anybody can view. I mean, there's nothing super special, so feel free to make a copy. So the confidential information has been removed. I mean, there wasn't confidential information to begin with, but there's nothing proprietary in there. It's just sort of generally available links all gathered in one spot. Yeah. Hope that was helpful for folks, and hopefully I will see a chunk of you at Pantheon too.
So great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you guys for joining us today for Lady Titans, our monthly meeting. We hope we'll see you again in our next meeting. In the meantime, stay involved, keep connected on Facebook in our community. We just appreciate you all, and we'll give you a few minutes back today to go and enjoy the rest of your day. So thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Stephanie.